Hello, theme park enthusiasts, and welcome back to Planet Coaster. In the last episode here, we went ahead and set up this Wild Mouse coaster over here, and in this episode, we're going to do something very similar, but slightly different. We're going to set up what I am calling the Wilder Mouse coaster over on the opposing side of the entrance area. So with this, what I really want is to have something that's somewhat of a mirror image of the Wild Mouse coaster, including the building. Just as I did with the restaurant and the gift shop, I wanted to sort of create that very dual image type of thing. So the first thing I did here was go ahead and copy the design of the building from the other side, because that way I can go ahead and paste that building in once I've got the coaster a little bit set up. That's just what we're doing here, just making sure that everything sort of lines up and is exactly as I would want it. Making sure of height, everything of that nature. As I said, the whole purpose of this is, yes, it's going to be a different coaster, so it's going to have its own ride, its own feel in a way, and give the customers something else to enjoy in the park. But the purpose here is really to go ahead and have a second, not only having the second ride, but at the same time creating that mirror image in the park. So at first I was trying to make the building fit the coaster, and then I realized no, actually what I need to do is make the coaster fit the building. So went ahead and moved the coaster around to fit with the building once I had the building at the right level that I wanted and where I wanted the building. Then I had to sort of play around with it because I wanted the coaster to be hidden within the framework. Once I got that set up, then I could really look at actually designing the coaster. And I'm going to have that little cut into the ground stuff. Just one of those things that's going to have to happen. I wanted to change the color scheme of the coaster immediately so that way it fit what I was wanting, including the trains and such. So, as I said, I am calling this the Wilder Mouse. The other one was the classic wooden style Wild Mouse coaster. And with this one, it's the more modern spinning Wild Mouse coaster. I have been on one of these. I was on it in San Antonio at the livestock show that they had. I was there for a concert on a particular night, and they had the carnival going on outside. I saw this coaster, and I really wanted to jump on and see how it was, because I'd never done one of these coasters before. And I'll say, it was okay. I'd say I think I was a bit partial because of the fact that I had actually been at SeaWorld in San Antonio earlier that day, and so with that in mind, I somewhat had I would say almost a biased opinion because of the fact that I had been on the large coasters of SeaWorld, and so in comparison, a Carnival Wild Mouse coaster wasn't exactly something that was overly thrilling. But at the same time, as I said, it was a good coaster. It was enjoyable. So, and once again, this coaster, just like the other Wild Mouse, is not meant to be a focal point of the park. It is meant to stand out and give some definition and character to the park, but it is not one of the main rides. The wooden monster roller coaster that you can see in the background there, and the haunted house in the background there are two of the really big rides. This is instead one of those rides that's much more meant to gobble up guests, keep people moving around the park instead of being stuck in one area and such, and just overall enhance their experience while at the park. Now with this one, unlike the other Wild Mouse coaster where I did sort of research and I made sure that the coaster fit the sort of specifications of a Wild Mouse coaster, and that one was, as I had said in the previous video, inspired by Wild Mouse XXL, this one is not. This one I didn't really do a ton of research on. What I instead did was I wanted it to somewhat be a mirror image of the Wild Mouse XXL. So for that, I have the big drops that we have in here. I have the turns, and I have it being sort of in the same footprint. It crosses the path just like the other one does. Now, of course, the steel structure for it is different because of the different style of coaster. But as I said, I did want something that was going to be similar in appearance. It's going to ride different, for one, because of the spinning feature of the vehicle, but as I said, I wanted it to have that sort of similar visual impact. So here I'm just having to actually see if this will work and such, because it is a different coaster overall, so I need to be paying attention to things like, can it clear the height? And it did not there on that first drop, so I went ahead and adjusted that hill to make sure that it would clear. I also had increased the lift hill speed. That's one of those that I find is just a fairly simple cheat in this game almost, of if you're needing more speed or in order to get over a hill, things of that nature, increasing the chain lift hill speed gets you that difference that's necessary. Now here I was finding I was about to crash into the gift shop, so I didn't really feel like moving the entire coaster and its building away and such, so instead I just looped away from it here, made it into a turn. And as I said, this is one of those that I'm really just sort of playing this coaster by sort of thought process and just eyesight, instead of based on any particular coaster. I wanted to make sure that I had these nice looping turns that would really allow the coaster to spin quite a bit and such. This is not at all the way that one would be at, say, a carnival and such. This area here I put in because it is more standard for this type of coaster, but otherwise, as I said, I wanted to create something that I felt worked for this park. So it's, if anything, this would be considered an original design for one of these coasters, but I think that it does still fit within what would be considered sort of realistic for one of these coasters. I don't think that the height or anything is just too insane. I think that it would be possible, and if a park that had a big enough budget wanted to, they could definitely get this company to make one of these coasters for them. Now here I'm just sort of doing what I always like to do at the end of a coaster, and that's I'm setting up the brake run and such. I like to do that before I go ahead and finish off the actual track, so that way I can ensure that I sort of know where the train needs to end up in the end. And I wanted to put in a block section brake there. I've put in several block sections to the overall train. Now these are not meant to really slow the train down in most of the ride. The point of them is much more to go ahead and allow it so that multiple trains can be on the course at the same time. I was careful to make sure that all of the trains are block sectioned at points where they will not be stuck if the train, if they had to be used at a point in time. But I wanted to make sure that I had the availability to put in multiple trains on this course, because unlike the Wild Mouse coaster, where it has multiple cars that go at the same time, this was just one car at the beginning there, and I wanted to, as I said, make sure that I had multiple cars, because this is going to be a big theme park, or a big amusement park overall in the end, and I wanted to make sure that it has enough rides for the people who are going to be there. Overall, I liked it, but there were areas that I found that were a little problematic here. Basically, at this end point, I like how it drops down, but I felt like the drop here was almost a bit too severe, and that there's this flat area over here that was just too flat as it was. So I went ahead and adjusted that in order to try to get a little bit more action going on at that point, so it's not just sort of this flat stalled area. And that's why on this one I continue rewriting it multiple times to try to ensure that I see how the ride feels overall for the guests. I will though have a portion on the video here where we will do it at real speed, so you can really get a feel of how the ride should feel overall. And what I did get as far as the overall design, I felt worked out well. It wasn't exactly standard, but I think it would be an enjoyable coaster that people could want to ride. And that, as I said, is sort of the point I had for this. Again, here I felt like I had made an area that was just too flat. I needed to pick up some speed here, and so instead of having the really big drop that I had before, I go ahead and have a little mini drop here first, and then reconnect it. So that way I'm getting speed throughout the ride instead of just in certain areas. And here I am just adjusting the block brakes so that it's not actually slowing the train down nearly as much. Somehow I had deleted this piece of track. Don't know how that occurred, but it did. But once we get that back in place, we'll go ahead and ride it at normal speed here. So as I said, fairly fast lift hill to it. I didn't. I personally am a proponent of fast lift hills. I know that having a slow lift hill in reality can make it almost a bit more nerve-wracking because you have time to think about it before you go on a drop and such. But my thing is, personally on a coaster, I do like the fact of just getting to sort of fly through it in a way and get to the fun parts of it, the drops, the spins, everything of that nature. So my personal preference is towards the fast lift hill, so that way people can enjoy the actual ride itself. As you can see, we've had some nice sweeping turns that have really allowed the car to spin nicely, and now we get into this more sharp turn section which really whips the car around, and I don't have a problem with that. I think it actually works out quite well for the ride. I think that the ride maintains a good speed here, and in the last episode of this series I will of course show each of these rides with the park completed, and I think that once there's stuff behind it there, it will have a much more interesting view while you're on a ride like this. So spinning around like that will give you a vision of all the different things that are in place around the ride, and I think that'll be a really neat thing. So you'll have to let me know in the comments once we go ahead and get the park finished off, and as I said, then it'll be open to guests. We'll have guests on all the rides, and then I'll do a video just showing the on-ride POVs of all of the different rides at that particular point in time. So now just getting the actual entrance and exit set up. Here on this side it's a little bit trickier because I do have all these different shops and stuff that are in place. So I need to go ahead and first just put in the actual straight walkway. Then I'm taking out these because I don't need to duplicate the stores that much. I want to go ahead and put in some different things for people to enjoy. So changing those out and instead putting in like an information booth, things of that nature, just so we have some variety. Here I just wanted to remove the floor some so that way I could easily see where my pathing was going. Just makes my life a little bit simpler. So all that gets connected. I know now it's the way I need it to be, so that way people just can get to the different areas as need be. I did leave the restroom and stuff because, once again, coming off a ride that's got this amount of spinning to it, as well as the amount of drops and stuff, I do want to make sure people are not getting sick in my park, and at the same time, if they've been waiting in line for a while, they might need a restroom. So I want to make sure that was taken care of for them as well. Here, unfortunately, I had where these two shops I had put in were a bit lower, so I'm just adjusting the height of the area to just fit with the actual height of the shop so it'll look appropriate. It's a little thing, but I did want it to look as best as I could here. It was slightly annoying, but oh well. Now with this one, as I said, I didn't recreate the shop because I really wanted that sense of duality. It's not just being lazy here. I will be building multiple other buildings where I'm going to entirely do brand new buildings and such and different designs. But for this one, as I said, I really wanted so when you're coming into the actual building, you'll have that feel, or into the actual park, you'll have that feeling of looking to one side and it'll look almost identical to the other side. So with that in mind, I had to go with the same building here. And what I'm going to end up doing is changing the color scheme slightly, as you'll see, and also this is basically the wilder version of a wild mouse because it has the spinning function as well. It's going to have drops and everything just like the other one does, but in this case it's going to be a bit more extreme. Here I'm trying to just get the spacing on the name right, and then I'll move all of this portion over. just deleting that so I can just move the title into that section so that it looks good. And I did like changing the colors up just slightly there, so it just gives you a little bit of interest and looks, like it was intentional. Here, unlike the other building where the steel structure of the coaster had stuck through the building and I ended up making a feature where it held this sign in place, I didn't have that here. So with that, I had to put something in, I felt like, in order to hold the sign. So I just went with some of these beams that I just put through it so that it looks like it's intentional here. It's almost ironic in a way that the steel structure that was sort of an annoyance in the previous episode, in the end I liked so much the way it was that it's like I felt I had to put something here to sort of make up for its absence with this particular sign. And I realized I had not actually copied, but I actually had cut, so I had to move the sign back out here as well. Then, same as I did on the other coaster, I wanted to go ahead and put the name of the coaster also on the structure itself so it could be seen from multiple locations in the park. Once again, for this amusement park, one of the big focuses that I have is really focusing on lighting. I really care about how this park's going to look at night, because I think in a park like this, it works in the day. It's a nice park, you would enjoy going to it. But when this park is really going to shine the most is going to be when it's at night. And you have the lighting just taking over, and everything has this soft glow to it. So definitely needed to make sure that the sign was in place properly so that it would add to that overall glow and you would know what you were looking at here. And then again, adding some beams in just for support in places where it needed it, so that it does look like it's actually mounted to the actual structure. Then for this, as I said, I want it to be the same as the other side, but sort of a mirror image, much like I did with the restaurant and the gift shop. What I'm doing here is basically changing all the primary colors. If it was purple before, it's going to go that yellowish gold, and then if it was gold before, it's going to go to the purple. Same thing with the lights that are hidden inside the towers here. They're going to also change to be the opposing color. So they were yellow before, now they're going to go purple. I actually really love the way the purple comes out with these towers on this side because it gives a very interesting hue to it. And once again, I mean, it makes it different enough in my opinion, where there's, you aren't looking at just a complete mirror, but at the same time, it's still, when you look from side to side, you would have that feeling of seeing the same thing. That's exactly what I wanted. Now just getting the roof here and doing the same thing to it. And if you notice, this is sort of the reverse of the restaurant and the gift shop, where the restaurant and gift shop were, the yellow was primarily on when you're walking into the park on the left-hand side, and the purple was on the right. With this, the purple will be on the left, and the yellow will be on the right. So that way, I didn't want it to become really where one side of the entire walkway was all yellow and the other side was all purple. I wanted to sort of mix and match, go back and forth and stuff, so that way there is that contrast going on throughout. As we work our way down the midway, I will definitely be looking to keep that in mind. And I feel like as the midway fills out, the buildings are going to, further down the midway, not be the exact same. They're going to, for one, have different purposes to them. So that will cause some differentiation, but as I said, really at the beginning of the park here, at the front of the park, I wanted that sort of duality look to it. Now with the fairy lights here, I am going to leave those yellow even though I'm changing the color of the wood that they're on. And the reason for that is pretty straightforward. I don't feel like purple lights in that case would really show up well. I think it wouldn't look that great. And the whole point, as I said, with the lighting is I want that specific look. So with that in mind, I went ahead and left them yellow. So you won't really notice them too much during the day like you might on the purple buildings, but at night they'll still have that great glow that I want to the overall look of it. So it's just a matter of changing all these different colors on the different things here. A lot of work in doing so, but I really think it does make a nice impact on the place overall. I will also say, and we're going to see it in the upcoming episodes here, I believe even in this next episode, I'm going to start putting in some locations in the park that are much more aesthetic for the game than they actually are practical. That is not to say they would not be used in the actual park if it were real, but just when it comes to the video game version of the park, they aren't going to actually have a purpose or a use. It's not something I've done in parks before, but I just feel like there are many things in this game that are just missing. There are rides that don't exist, and there are just other features that you would find in a lot of parks that also just aren't here in the game. And so I have found some on like the workshop and such. They aren't functional, but they are still visible. And so I feel like it'll add to the overall look of the park. And I have plans for many places in the park where I'm going to have some of those. I do have ideas of how I'm going to make those work so that they will hopefully work properly. Now I thought about changing the floor color here, and I go back and forth on that. I also did want to change the number of scooters and stuff like that here, because I don't want it to look at all like a carbon copy, where it's just like nothing has changed. So same thing here, deleting a few shirts, changing colors of other shirts, so that way if you look from one shop to the next, it doesn't look exactly the same. Also even moving the shirt racks around a little bit, just to make it look slightly different. And I do feel like there are still little things that need to be changed and adjusted on this. As I said, I think part of the almost challenge or problem of it is copy and pasting an entire shop like this over. It really caused some things to just seem not to align properly, which is sort of odd. But I've noticed that's one thing in Planet Coaster is the more detailed you go and then you attempt to copy something, the more it doesn't align exactly the way you want. In this case, I mean, that shelf was a perfect example where the shelf did not go where it should have. But the nicety of it was I was planning on changing that shelf out anyways because I wanted, again, to just be slightly different than the previous one. I'm looking at other shelving here just to see if I find something that I really like. Some of them I'd found them on the workshop. I feel they just don't fit. Their scale is wrong and everything like that. So I go ahead and delete them. And then again, it's about moving some of this stuff around just so that, yes, it's similar, but they are still different from the way they were before. I do have every intention of putting this park onto the workshop in the end, so other people can play and enjoy it. And as I said, I wanted something where you could go from building to building and then really see, hey, this does look slightly different than the previous one. So here I'm adding a little bit of under the stairs coverage here, just to make this look a little bit more tidy than it had originally. And this is the kind of thing that I do notice, and in some of the videos you will also notice I do this, I will go back and forth to some of my previous builds and say, you know what, I want it, I thought about this since I made that video, and it really was a needed add-on just to make it look the way I wanted. So just getting here where I got it lined up as I wanted, putting that in, and just filling that in. And then again, same sort of deal here. I'm gonna go back over this shop and fix the issue over on this one, because now that I've noticed it, might as well adjust it properly over here as well. And I mean, to me, that was an actual issue. You are talking about amusement park here where you're going to have a bunch of kids and such. The last thing you want is some kid deciding to go and hide under the stairs from their parents or something like that. It would just be a bit of a nightmare in that way. I also wanted to change up the railing there, so I go ahead and change out the padding in order to get a different railing. Now here, I'm wanting to put in the lighting outside, just like I had for the air coaster. I could not copy and paste that over, nor would I have wanted to, because I do want to go ahead and make sure that it fits for the track on this particular ride. So what I usually do is I like to go with high points in a coaster and low points in a coaster in order to put lighting underneath of it. But here, I was wanting a light before the walkway, so I was seeing if that would work out there. And then I decided, you know what, I'll come back to that. I go ahead and put the lighting over on the areas I would of the drops and stuff. I do go back to it and say, you know what, I do want a light in that area. So I'm putting the yellow lights in first. I do want to put some purple lights in, just as I had with the other coaster. But the yellow ones I feel stand out more, so I wanted to get them in place first to feel like I had good coverage of the coaster overall. If you notice also, I did sort of alternate where those lights go in comparison to the opposing coaster. So where the yellow is mostly on the exterior of the other coaster, on this coaster the yellow is more toward the interior and the purple is toward the exterior. Again, playing with that whole duality idea that I've got going on. So the last thing here is just adding some lights to the signs in the front. And with that, I will go ahead and wrap up this episode and the Wilder Mouse coaster. If you enjoyed what I did in this episode, please go ahead and click that like button. If you've not already, please subscribe to the channel and click the bell icon so you're aware when I produce new videos in the future. Thank you, and I hope to see you again for the next episode of the Appleford Amusement Park.